Chapter 2914, Lore Technique. Chapter 2914, Lore Technique. Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Fire Dance, Cola, Violet Cloud, Yang Tianxing, and the other longtime members of Zero Wing felt an indescribable sense of relief and excitement. Guild Leader, our situation is terrible. The enemy's air power is too strong, Fang Shahan said in a helpless tone as she pointed at the enemy's Tier 5 commander and the 30-plus flying ships. The fortress's defensive magic array still needs more than 10 minutes to recover. I'm afraid we won't last that long. Although Shifeng's arrival meant that they had someone to hold back the enemy commander, they still had to contend with hundreds of Tier 4 NPCs and flying mounts when their side had less than 100 Tier 4 combatants. Although they had the fortress's magic array support, which mitigated the effects of the Tier 5 NPCs' mana domains and suppressed the enemy Tier 4 NPCs, they were still at an absolute disadvantage. Not to mention, the Steel Lion Fortress's commander, the level 200, Tier 4 Sky Knight Sepul, currently had less than 50% of his HP remaining. If not for the many Tier 3 and Tier 4 healers supporting him, he would have long since fallen to the 20-plus level 180, Tier 4 NPCs ganging up on him. Relax. After looking at Fang Shahan, Shifeng turned to the Blue Thunder flying ship and smiled, saying, if it's air power, we don't lack any, either. We don't lack any. Fang Shahan glanced at the Blue Thunder flying ship and then turned to survey the enemy's fleet of flying ships, her worries not easing in the slightest. Naturally, she knew that a mysterious iron flying ship was powerful and that it could go up against Tier 5 combatants. However, the enemy's Tier 5 combatants were by no means weak. Moreover, several dozen Tier 4 NPCs had constructed a summoning array some distance behind the enemy's commander. A monster summoned by several dozen Tier 4 NPCs definitely wouldn't be weak. There was even a high possibility it would be a Tier 5 legendary monster. No sooner had Fang Shahan finished speaking than those several dozen Tier 4 NPCs completed their incantations. A gigantic bone dragon then emerged from the summoning array, its 500-meter-long body matching the Blue Thunder flying ship in size. The bone dragon also had a wingspan of 1,000 meters. When this bone dragon appeared and let loose a roar, the intense shockwave it generated made all the Tier 3 combatants on the battlefield feel lightheaded. Ancient Bone Dragon, Undead, Legendary, Level 180 HP 200 billion. Upon seeing the Ancient Bone Dragon statistics, the players inside the Steel Lion Fortress gasped reflexively. Even the players spectating the battle through the Twin Towers Kingdom's forums were dumbfounded, many people spitting out the drink in their mouth. This was the first time any of the Twin Towers Kingdom's players saw a legendary monster's statistics, and they all couldn't help despairing. Even the Tier 4 players in the fortress revealed a bitter smile. Setting aside the wide-range attacks the Bone Dragon could execute with its massive body, just its 200 billion HP was more than enough to make any Tier 4 player lose hope. After all, the Ancient Bone Dragon could recover 2% of its HP every 5 seconds due to its battle recovery. In other words, it could regenerate 4 billion HP every 5 seconds. Combined with its Tier 5 defense, even 100 Tier 4 players attacking with everything they had wouldn't be enough to kill it. It's over, we're dead for sure this time. Many of the Tier 3 players in the Steel Lion Fortress lost their fighting spirit as they looked at the Ancient Bone Dragon in the sky. Shifeng's arrival was indeed a huge help to them. However, along with his arrival, the enemy forces had become even stronger. Although Shifeng was a Tier 5 Sword Saint, he couldn't go up against one Tier 5 NPC and one Tier 5 legendary monster simultaneously. Not to mention, the enemy's Tier 5 commander was far from ordinary, clad in a complete set of fragmented legendary set equipment and even wielding a legendary greatsword. He was a top-ranking existence even among Tier 5 existences, and definitely not someone current Tier 5 players could contend with. When Fang Shahan saw the Ancient Bone Dragon, her complexion also turned very ugly. She had never imagined that the Outer World NPCs could summon an actual Tier 5 legendary monster. This Ancient Bone Dragon was much stronger than the 9-headed world snake the Outer World players summoned previously. The summoning array the Outer World players had used was something similar to the Divine Beast's Descent magic array. The monster summoned wasn't an actual monster but a magical illusion. So long as one heavily damaged the summoning array, one would dispel the illusion. It was a different story for actual summoned monsters. The only way to get rid of a summoned monster was by killing either the monster or the monster's summoner. However, there was no specific summoner in a group summoning. Unless one killed all of the summoners involved, the summoned creature would remain, obedient to the summoner's commands. Before the Steel Lion Fortress's players could overcome their despair, the Outer Worlds Tier 5 commander, Los Ferried, pointed at the Steel Lion Fortress and ordered, "Attack. Kill all of the natives." At Los Ferried's command, the ancient Bone Dragon, along with the 30-plus advanced flying ships and 6 bronze flying ships, began bombarding the Steel Lion Fortress. The ancient Bone Dragon used the Tier 5 spell Hell Lotus and showered the Steel Lion Fortress with crimson flames so hot that they incinerated space itself. Meanwhile, the flying ships fired all their cannons, raining hundreds of destructive beams on the fortress. Boom! The resulting explosion was so devastating that it was audible even tens of thousands of yards away. The consequent shockwave ravaged the area within 3,000 yards of the fortress. Upon seeing this attack, the Outer World NPCs charging at the Steel Lion Fortress revealed joyous expressions. If the Steel Lion Fortress received such an attack without its defensive magic array, all of the fortress's inhabitants would disappear without a trace. However, when the smoke enveloping the fortress dissipated, the Outer World NPCs suddenly fell silent. How is this possible? The Outer World's Tier 3 NPCs stared at the sight before them with dumbfounded expressions. In fact, even the people inside the Steel Lion Fortress were stunned by this situation, their minds boggled. Before anyone realized it, a gigantic magic barrier had formed around the Steel Lion Fortress and blocked all the attacks from the flying ships and the ancient Bone Dragon. Let alone annihilating the fortress's inhabitants, the flying ships and the ancient Bone Dragon had even failed to scratch the fortress walls. However, before anyone could snap out of their daze, the barrier enveloping the fortress suddenly disappeared. 6 crystalline spheres the size of a small house then flew toward the Blue Thunder flying ship and hovered around it. That flying ship created that barrier just now? Are you kidding me? Is that really a flying ship? How can it stop a legendary monster's Tier 5 spell? Be it the players or NPCs inside the Steel Lion Fortress, all of them currently had their mouths hanging wide open as they stared at the Blue Thunder flying ship. After all, the flying ship's performance had shattered their notions of flying ships. The Blue Thunder flying ship's defensive capabilities practically rivaled a mobile fortress's. At this time, even Fang Shahan, who knew the specifics of the situation, was rendered speechless. She had no idea that a mysterious iron flying ship could be that strong. Of those present, only Shifeng found this situation normal. The Grey Thunder flying ship might only be a mysterious iron flying ship, but its technological content exceeded that of the average mysterious iron flying ship. Its usage of mana was particularly exceptional. If not for its inadequate materials and power source, it could easily become a secret silver flying ship. Now that you're done attacking, it's our turn now. Pointing at the Outer World's NPC army, Shifeng commanded, "Beat them up." Along with Shifeng's command, the Zero-Wing members seated on the Blue Thunder flying ship eagerly revved up the engine's output to maximum. Subsequently, the flying ship's 40 advanced magic elven cannons, 12 floating crystal cannons, and Thunder of Destruction main cannon fired at the enemy flying ships and flying mounts and the ancient Bone Dragon simultaneously. Boom! 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 For a moment, countless lightning arcs and beams of light filled the battlefield, making it seem as if the heavens were doling out divine retribution. The ancient Bone Dragon and Outer World NPCs reacted quickly and activated defensive spells to protect themselves. However, apart from the ancient Bone Dragon's defensive barrier, the defensive barriers conjured for the flying ships and flying mounts all shattered without exception. When the barrage ended, several dozen flying mounts crashed to the ground. The advanced flying ships also suffered severe damage, their mobility plummeting significantly. With how much damage they took from just one bombardment, they would probably fall after another 3 or 4. As for the bronze flying ships, although they didn't take any serious damage, their armor's durability still plummeted by a significant margin. After the Blue Thunder flying ship ended its barrage, everyone on the battlefield turned to stare at it, petrified. Isn't this thing a little too strong? So, This is Zero Wing's trump card? The Steel Lion Fortress's players found their minds stagnating as they took in the tattered state of the Outer World Army's air units. Just a moment ago, they were clearly at an overwhelming disadvantage in air power. However, the Blue Thunder flying ship had instantly turned the tables with its arrival. This situation was simply unbelievable. When Kola looked at the distant Blue Thunder flying ship, his eyes glowed and his mouth watered. He then turned to Shifeng and asked, "Guild leader, when can I buy one?" Compared to flying mounts, traveling across the continent in the Blue Thunder flying ship would be a much more wonderful experience. "You'll get your chance eventually," Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw Kola's excitement. "However, this thing needs 10 people to pilot. It's not something you can pilot alone." When Shifeng finished speaking, the Zero Wing members present were all thrilled. After all, based on Shifeng's words, the guild would eventually sell the Blue Thunder flying ship to its members once the flying ship was available in larger numbers. This meant that all of them had an opportunity to own this steel behemoth. And even if they couldn't ride it alone, they could simply form a team to do so. However, shortly after Shifeng finished speaking, the enemy commander, who had not taken any action thus far, suddenly turned to Shifeng. At this time, though, the contempt in Los Ferid's eyes had disappeared. There was even a faint smile on his face. "You are an exceptional heaven-blessed individual," Los Ferid said as he lifted his greatsword and rested it on his shoulder. Smiling, he asked, "May I know your name?" "Black Flame," Shifeng replied calmly. Although Black Flame wasn't his real ID, he had long since gotten accustomed to using it. Moreover, the outer world knew of only Black Flame and not Yifeng. "Black Flame?" Los Ferid, who appeared to be in his 50s, nodded. He then earnestly introduced himself. "I am Los Ferid, the Commander-in-Chief of the God's Domain Crusade Army's 19th Corps and one of the 17 stars of the Holy Grail. You are qualified to be my enemy." After Los Ferid finished speaking, the strength of his mana domain suddenly increased. Now, even the fortress's magic arrays couldn't nullify it. The instant Los Ferid's mana domain enveloped the Steel Lion Fortress, everyone inside the fortress felt their bodies become significantly heavier. Now, the fortress's Tier 3 combatants even had difficulty lifting their heads. A scorching heat also blanketed their bodies as if they were standing in a burning hell. Even Fire Dance, who had an 8-piece epic set equipment equipped and wielded a legendary weapon, felt immense pressure on her body. She would be fortunate to exhibit even 60% of her usual combat power. And as a result of this suppression, she became even less of an opponent for the enemy's level 180, Tier 5 Vanguard leader in front of her. One of the 17 stars of the Holy Grail? Shifeng grew more cautious after hearing Los Ferid's introduction. Although he had never heard of the 17 stars of the Holy Grail, God's Domain had an official ranking list known as the 10 Saints, which represented the 10 strongest combatants recognized by the War God's Temple. Every one of these 10 saints was rumored to have demigod-level combat power. Shifeng guessed that Los Ferid was probably on par with the 10 saints. Based on his observation of Los Ferid's mana domain, he could tell that the other party had already mastered a world lore. The only thing holding the NPC back from reaching Tier 6 was his concentration. Nevertheless, with a legendary weapon in hand, Los Ferid should be a powerhouse even among demigods. However, although Los Ferid possessed a powerful mana domain, it had no effect on Shifeng whatsoever. Immediately, Shifeng unleashed his own mana domain, cancelling out Los Ferid's and even suppressing the NPC slightly. "Let's fight. Let me see how powerful you heaven-blessed individuals are," Los Ferid said, his body suddenly splitting into more than 100 doppelgangers that charged at Shifeng from different directions. Tier 5 skill, Shadowlight Kill. After activating Shadow Kill, Los Ferid spun and swung his greatsword. Tier 5 skill, Great Holy Cross. Tier 5 skill, Draconic Stars. Immediately, Los Ferid's doppelgangers transformed into gigantic crosses that pierced through space. Each of these crosses then split and transformed into several dozen serpentine dragons. Several thousand serpentine dragons flew toward Shifeng, their large numbers making it impossible to dodge or block them all. He combined 3 Tier 5 skills. Fire Dance and the others were startled when they saw Los Ferid's attack. For true expert players, Combining the effects of skills was a must-learn technique. However, the higher the tier of the skills, the more difficult combining them would be. Currently, even domain realm experts like Fire Dance and Yang Tianxing could just barely combine 2 tier 4 skills. Yet, Los Ferid had combined 3 tier 5 skills. Los Ferid's combat standard was simply unprecedented. Every addition to a skill combination would double the power of the combined attack. Los Ferid's combined tier 5 skills could exhibit quadruple the power of a standard tier 5 skill. Moreover, Los Ferid was also wielding a legendary weapon. These two factors would probably deter even a tier 5 dragon from receiving Los Ferid's attack. Amazing. When Shifeng perceived the several thousand serpentine dragons flying toward him, he was awed. If this were before his fight with the scholar, he would definitely rank Los Ferid number 1 when it came to the usage of skills out of all the NPCs he knew. However, while Los Ferid's attack might seem unstoppable in the eyes of other players, that wasn't the case for Shifeng. After Shifeng's concentration reached the tier 5 peak standard, his brain's processing speed had undergone another qualitative transformation. Previously, he could only increase his brain's processing speed 2-fold. Now, he could increase it 4-fold. This was also the part that made mental strength masters powerful. Nonetheless, he still didn't dare take the approaching serpentine dragons lightly. Immediately, he unsheathed the Light of Two Worlds and executed a horizontal slash. Spatial slash. Swords transmigration. Shifeng had gotten promoted to tier 5 only recently, so he had hardly any tier 5 skills that could counter Los Ferid's attack. His only option to offset this shortcoming was to rely on his weapons, equipment, and techniques. The Light of Two Worlds was one of the 10 great legendary weapons. It was among the strongest legendary weapons in existence, not something ordinary legendary weapons could hope to match. The next moment, with Shifeng as the center, a golden lotus bloomed on the battlefield, the petals of the lotus nullifying the energy making up the serpentine dragons. In the blink of an eye, the several thousand serpentine dragons vanished from the battlefield. Upon seeing that his first attack had failed, Los Ferid immediately took a different approach and transformed into a streak of light shooting toward Shifeng. Tier 5 skill, Shadow Light Step. Shadow Light Steps not only provided Los Ferid with a brief moment of invulnerability but also increased his attack speed and destructive power. After appearing in front of Shifeng and swinging his greatsword down at him, Los Ferid also let out a roar. Tier 5 skill, Voice of the Soul. When activated, Voice of the Soul would stun all enemies within a radius of several hundred yards, causing their reaction speed to plummet. The skill also dealt a heavy blow to their souls. However, Los Ferid still wasn't done, even after activating Voice of the Soul. He also activated World Strike, an additional skill that came with his greatsword. It allowed him to launch an attack at the Tier 6 peak standard and had a 1-hour cooldown. Even a Tier 6 existence would have to be wary of the combination of these 3 skills, what more a Tier 5 player like Shifeng. However, as Los Ferid took action, Shifeng activated Divine Steps and instantly swapped positions with a doppelganger located over 1,000 yards away from him, dodging the NPC's Voice of the Soul. Unfortunately, as all 36 of his doppelgangers were still within range of Los Ferid's World Strike, Shifeng had no choice but to counter with World Breaker. Boom! An explosion took place in midair, and everyone on the battlefield gaped in shock when they saw the aftermath of the clash between Shifeng and Los Ferid. The sky above the Steel Lion Fortress had turned into a dark, empty void. Some of the advanced and bronze flying ships, unfortunate enough to be caught within this void, even turned to dust. That is a powerful sword you have there. Not only did it break my World Strike, but it even injured me, Los Ferid exclaimed as he looked at the Light of Two Worlds in Shifeng's hand. The great sword he wielded was top tier even among legendary weapons. Yet, even after he activated his greatsword's strongest skill, his attack still lost to Shifeng's. This was simply unbelievable. Although he lost less than 10% of his HP from the exchange, this was still an astonishing outcome. After all, ever since he equipped the Holy Star set, he had never received so much damage from a single attack until now. Meanwhile, the players inside the fortress were dumbfounded by the outcome of the clash between Shifeng and Los Ferid. In their opinion, This was no longer a battle between humans but a battle between gods. When Los Ferid executed his earlier attack, most of them already thought they would die. Fortunately, Shifeng had shattered the attack. Otherwise, the Steel Lion Fortress would probably have disappeared from the Twin Towers Kingdom. You overpraise me. When Shifeng saw that Los Ferid had received some damage, he immediately followed up on his small victory with Golden Soul, elevating his soul to the Tier 6 standard. He then swapped positions with the doppelganger closest to Los Ferid and swung the Light of Two Worlds at the NPC. Holy Annihilation! Now that Shifeng's concentration was elevated to Tier 6 and he understood the true way to utilize the Law of Destruction, he executed Holy Annihilation with much greater proficiency than before. However, when executing this attack, Shifeng didn't use the Heavenly Blue Saint's Destruction Magic Array. Instead, he tried using his own mana to break the operations of the ambient mana. Originally, when Shifeng's concentration was only at the Tier 5 peak standard, accomplishing this feat would have been incredibly difficult. However, after activating Golden Soul, his control over and perception of mana had undergone a qualitative transformation. This, in turn, reduced the difficulty of the challenge significantly, turning the impossible possible. The next moment, the space Shifeng's sword passed through transformed into an empty void, the power of his attack having reached the Tier 6 intermediate standard already. A law technique. Los Ferid was startled when he saw the destroyed space. As someone who had already mastered a world law, integrating the world law into his swordsmanship was something he had always dreamed of. However, accomplishing this feat was simply too difficult, which was why even demigods could normally only rely on mana techniques as a guide to make use of world laws. However, Shifeng currently wasn't relying on any magic arrays as a guide. He was making use of a world law purely with his own strength. The power one could exhibit this way was much greater than what one could exhibit by relying on a mana technique. This was because a mana technique was a fixed sword technique. If one had to rely on mana techniques to make use of world laws, one could use only these specific mana techniques. However, if one could freely make use of a world law, then regardless of what technique one used, all of one's techniques would carry the power of the world law. The difference in flexibility between the two was like heaven and earth. Of course, the law technique Shifeng currently displayed was extremely crude, and he could use only a small portion of the Law of Destruction's power. Nonetheless, Los Ferid dared not act recklessly against Shifeng's attack. He immediately swung his great sword. Mana technique, Burning Sea. Boom. When the two swords collided, a vast void and a sea of flames appeared in the sky once more. The terrifying shockwave the collision generated even obliterated the Tier 3 combatants nearby, while those standing farther away got sent flying. Subsequently, the clangor of swords clashing rang out in the sky time after time. Apart from some Tier 4 individuals with incredibly high basic attributes, everyone else dared not stay anywhere near Shifeng and Los Ferid's battle. The clash between Shifeng and Los Ferid continued for more than a minute, the deafening explosions numbing everyone's mind. However, the more Shifeng fought, the fiercer his attacks became. Despite Los Ferid doing his best to avoid a head-on clash, Shifeng took the initiative to do the exact opposite. Shifeng was relying on this intense life-and-death battle to familiarize himself with the process of breaking the operations of mana. As more time passed, Los Ferid gradually fell into a disadvantage, his HP decreasing continuously. Only after 2 minutes had gone by and the effect of Shifeng's golden soul disappeared did Los Ferid regain the upper hand. Nevertheless, Los Ferid still couldn't put an end to the battle. This was because even after losing the ability to use his law technique, Shifeng could still rely on Holy Annihilation to use the Law of Destruction. Hence, he had no problem clashing with Los Ferid. Moreover, both of them had healers supporting them. Unless one of them made a fatal mistake, neither was unlikely to die. In the meantime, the Blue Thunder flying ship was deeply entangled with the ancient bone dragon. However, as the Blue Thunder flying ship had a lot of cannons, it managed to pin down the ancient bone dragon while shooting down the enemy's flying ships and flying mounts one after another. When Los Ferid saw another bronze flying ship crash to the ground, his eyes twitched involuntarily. At this point, his army had already lost 4 bronze flying ships and over 20 advanced flying ships. The loss of flying mounts was even worse. These things were practically mobile targets in front of the Blue Thunder flying ship. And worse, the Steel Lion Fortress's defensive barrier was gradually taking shape once more. Evidently, the fortress's defensive magic array had already been fully reactivated. After the Tier 5 Vanguard leader repelled Fire Dance and saw that the fortress's defensive barrier was reforming, he looked toward Los Ferid and said, "Lord Ferid, we cannot continue like this. Once the defensive barrier is up again, we'll be very passive." At the Vanguard leader's words, Los Ferid gritted his teeth and commanded, "Everyone, retreat." Obedient to Los Ferid's command, the Outer Worlds NPC army, which only had around 2 million NPCs remaining, began an orderly retreat from the Steel Lion Fortress. Los Ferid, the Vanguard leader, and the ancient Bone Dragon served as the rearguard, preventing Shifeng and the Blue Thunder flying ship from giving chase. After the Outer World NPCs opened a teleportation portal and left the battlefield, Los Ferid and the Vanguard leader promptly retreated into the portal as well, leaving the ancient Bone Dragon behind. The summoning array used to summon the ancient Bone Dragon could keep it under control for only a certain period. After this period was over, the ancient Bone Dragon would regain its freedom. Hence, they might as well leave it behind and have it pin down Shifeng and the others. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Once the Outer Worlds NPC army retreated, Shifeng and the others spent around 20 minutes killing the ancient Bone Dragon. When the level 180 legendary monster died, Fire Dance and the others leveled up once. The monster's death also awarded Zero Wing with one fragmented legendary weapon, over a dozen level 180 epic weapons and equipment, and several dozen legendary materials. Upon seeing the loot, the Tier 3 and Tier 4 players belonging to other guilds couldn't help growing envious. Afterward, Shifeng immediately rode the Blue Thunder flying ship to the Twin Towers Kingdom's two other battlefronts. The Redthorn Fortresses and Thunder Gorge City situations were much better than the Steel Lion Fortresses. This was especially true for Thunder Gorge City. Because Aqua Rose was now a Tier 5 Grand Wizard, the Outer World NPC army that attacked Thunder Gorge City received a resounding defeat, similar to the army that attacked the Steel Lion Fortress. As for the Redthorn Fortress, although the defenders here suffered somewhat terrible losses, they still managed to repulse the enemy. With the successful defense of these three strongholds, the Twin Towers Kingdom's players exploded with joy. Meanwhile, news of this astonishing outcome immediately spread across the entire continent, causing a sensation in God's domain. Chapter 29:15 Tides Have Turned. Chapter 29:15 Tides Have Turned. Dark Knight Empire, Thousand Nights City. Although nightfall was still several hours away, players already flooded the city's streets. In addition, more than 70% of the city's players were level 140 plus, Tier 3 experts. At this time, though, all of these experts had nervous and solemn expressions on their faces. The reason for their sullen mood was the consecutive failures to defend several of the Dark Knight Empire's border fortresses and cities. By now, the Empire's players had no choice but to retreat to the largest border city in the south to fight the Outer Worlds NPCs and players. Currently, over 8 million Tier 3 players and 200 Tier 4 experts had gathered in the city, more than what one would normally see even in Dark Knight City. Starlink's residence, Guild Leader's office. They won? Lu Tiendi was stunned when he read the report regarding the Twin Towers Kingdom his subordinate sent him. The Outer Worlds NPC army's abrupt decision to begin its invasion of the Twin Towers Kingdom had been Lu Tiendi's dearest wish. With just the NPC forces available in the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom, there was no way the Twin Towers Kingdom could repel the Outer Worlds NPC army. After all, there were almost no Tier 5 NPCs in these two kingdoms. In contrast, the Outer Worlds NPC army had multiple Tier 5 NPCs leading it. In Lu Tiendi's opinion, even with Shifeng's presence, the Twin Towers Kingdom would be fortunate to defend even one fortress, and the kingdom's fall was inevitable. Currently, out of all the Eastern Continent's empires fighting against the Outer World forces, only the Fire Dragon Empire managed to repulse the Outer World NPC army's invasion. Nonetheless, it had still lost two fortresses and had to resort to guerrilla warfare to stop the NPC army's advance completely. Yet, He was now told that Zero Wing had successfully defended not only the Steel Lion Fortress but also the Redthorn Fortress and Thunder Gorge City. Zero Wing had stopped the Outerworld NPC army in its tracks at the Twin Towers Kingdom's borders. 5 first-rate guilds' guild leaders standing nearby similarly looked dumbfounded, having never thought that Zero Wing would succeed in repelling the Outerworld's NPC army even without the support of their 5 guilds. Moreover, Zero Wing had even dealt significant damage to the Outerworld's NPC army. This victory also meant that the guild and independent players who had participated in the defense would earn a fortune. After all, without the interference of enemy air units, they would have a much easier time killing the enemy's Tier 3 NPCs. Guild leader, according to our investigations, Zero Wing's Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose have both gotten promoted to Tier 5. Moreover, the main reason behind Zero Wing's successful defense is its Blue Thunder flying ship. That single flying ship has the power to suppress the Outerworld army's air power, Yi Kuei said, a hint of envy appearing on his face when he mentioned the Blue Thunder flying ship. If not for that flying ship, Zero Wing wouldn't have been able to retain those 3 strongholds even with 3 Tier 5. The Blue Thunder flying ship. After watching a battle video showing the Blue Thunder flying ship's performance, Lu Tiandi turned to Yi Kuei and ordered in a determined tone, "Do everything you can to find out how Zero Wing acquired this flying ship. So long as we can get one ourselves, resisting the Outerworld's NPC army will no longer be a problem." The main reason why the Dark Knight Empire failed to defend its border fortresses and cities was its inadequate air power. As soon as the fortresses and cities' defensive magic arrays fell, the Outerworld NPC army's air units had destroyed the core magic arrays very quickly, depriving the defenders of their advantages. However, the Blue Thunder flying ship had easily solved this problem. Not only did the flying ship have the power to pin down a legendary monster, but it even pummeled the Outerworld's air fleet to the ground while doing so. It was basically a tyrant of the skies. Lu Tiandi wasn't the only one with designs on the Blue Thunder flying ship. After seeing its performance, the various superpowers and even the Outerworld's player forces began looking into how Zero Wing acquired this flying behemoth. Countless spies began sneaking into Starmoon Kingdom and Zero Wing. Lu Tiandi had gone the extra mile, offering 100 million credits to anyone who could provide detailed information and the source of the flying ship. He had even offered 100 billion credits to anyone who could get a complete Blue Thunder flying ship for Starlink. The bounty Lu Tiandi offered instantly caused an uproar among God's Domains players. After all, the average person wouldn't even see 10 million credits in their lifetime. Starmoon Kingdom, Starmoon City, Guild leader, many of our trading firm's core members fell for Starlink's temptations and sold all information regarding the Blue Thunder flying ship to Starlink, Melancholic Smile said in an embarrassed tone as she handed a list of names to Shifeng. Many of these people are even old members, who have been with Candlelight since its establishment. Yet, this time, the Blue Thunder flying ship's construction required a lot of manpower. Although all the participants had been required to sign a confidentiality agreement and given a significant amount of remuneration for silence, some people still fell for Starlink's inducement. Now, everyone knew of the Blue Thunder flying ship specifications and that the flying ship's design originated from Shifeng. At Melancholic Smile's words, Fire Dance, who stood beside Shifeng, chuckled and said, "That's nothing." Quite a few of Zero Wing's members even tried to steal the flying ship itself when it was getting repaired in the Sky Spring City residence. If not for Blackie and the others taking turns guarding it, these people might have even succeeded. The Blue Thunder flying ship wasn't bound to any specific player. Although its activation required a key, storing it into an epic spatial bag didn't. It's 100 billion credits, after all. Even I'm tempted to sell the flying ship, let alone them, Shifeng said, chuckling. It's impossible to stop others from targeting the flying ship. Letting someone carry it isn't an option, either. The only thing we can do is strengthen the security around it. Piloting the Blue Thunder flying ship required a minimum of 10 people. While having someone carry it in their bag might prevent theft to a certain degree, nobody knew when the Outerworld's NPC army would strike again. Should the Outerworld's NPC army return and the person holding the flying ship just so happen to be preoccupied with something, Zero Wing would be put into a very awkward situation. I've already stationed 4 Tier 4 fine gold guards inside the flying ship's control room. Without orders from you or one of the vice guild leaders, they will not allow anyone to pilot it, Fang Shahan said, nodding in agreement with Shifeng's words. Even if someone inside the guild plans to steal the flying ship, they will need to deal with those 4 guards first. The Tier 4 fine gold guards possessed combat power at the Tier 4 peak standard. Each of them could take on 2 or 3 ordinary Tier 4 players easily. Only Tier 4 players at the Void Realm standard and fully geared in epic equipment could fight one-on-one with these guards. Tier 3 players stood no chance whatsoever. By the way, how's the production of the Blue Thunder flying ships and Flame Beast puppets coming along? Shifeng asked, melancholic smile. Even Tier 5 combatants could do very little to affect the state of the current War of Worlds. To defend against the Outer Worlds NPC army adequately, Zero Wing would need a large number of Blue Thunder flying ships and Flame Beast puppets. The Flame Beast puppets' production difficulty and manpower requirement are lower, so we've already manufactured 3 of them thus far. We just need to engrave the core runes and magic arrays to complete them, Melancholic Smile reported. As for the Blue Thunder flying ship, we have encountered some difficulties. With the materials we have on hand, we can produce 3 more flying ships. However, because of the information leak, the various powers have started purchasing the production materials as well, so subsequent manufacturing will be a problem. In that case, build those 3 flying ships first and then focus on producing the Flame Beast puppets, Shifeng said after giving the matter some thought. The Outer Worlds 19th Army Corps had attacked only 3 locations in the Twin Towers Kingdom. With the 19th Army Corps strength, it could attack 5 or 6 locations simultaneously if it wanted to. If that happened, Zero Wing wouldn't be able to defend all of the targeted locations in time. At least 3 Blue Thunder flying ships were needed to defend the Twin Towers Kingdom's borders adequately. Guild leader, the Secret Pavilion, contacted us earlier, asking us to help them using the Blue Thunder flying ship. In return, they are willing to pay us 100,000 gold coins and 300,000 magic crystals as remuneration, Fang Shahan said as she forwarded the Secret Pavilion's request for help to Shifeng. She then added, because of the rewards we gave out to players who managed to kill the Outer World NPCs, Zero Wing Cities and Ancient Rock Cities' incomes have been greatly reduced. If we help the Secret Pavilion a few times, it will relieve a lot of the financial pressure on the guild. Previously, Shifeng had basically wiped out all of Zero Wing's liquid funds to obtain the 2 designs. The guild was also spending a lot of money to strengthen Ancient Rock City and recruit more members. After pondering on the matter for a moment, Shifeng said, we can help them, but we currently cannot afford to mobilize the Blue Thunder flying ship. Tell them that we are willing to send, at most, 3 Flame Beast puppets. Also, in addition to the coins and magic crystals, we will need 20 magic elven stones, 100 titan gold ingots, and 107 luminaries crystals as payment. The Blue Thunder flying ship was of utmost importance to the Twin Towers Kingdom's defense right now, so it definitely couldn't be sent outside the kingdom's borders. However, if the Secret Pavilion was only looking to defend a fortress or city, 3 Flame Beast puppets would more than suffice as reinforcements. After all, Tier 5 combatants were rare even among the Outer Worlds NPC army. Although the addition of 3 Tier 5 combatants might not let the Secret Pavilion achieve a landslide victory, the Secret Pavilion wouldn't have any trouble defending its fortresses and cities. I'll notify them right away, Fang Shahan said, nodding. Although Shifeng's conditions were slightly more demanding, they were preferable to losing a fortress or city. After all, losing an area's stronghold to the Outer World NPCs also meant losing access to the area's resources. Once the Outer World NPCs captured an area, no native player would dare set foot there to harvest resources anymore. Just as Fang Shahan expected, the Secret Pavilion agreed to Shifeng's conditions without hesitation. The Secret Pavilion also asked that Zero Wing come over as soon as possible, as the Outer Worlds NPC army had already started moving. The NPC army would take another 1 or 2 days, at most, before it began its assault on another one of the Fire Wing Empire's NPC cities. In response to the Secret Pavilion's request, Shifeng immediately started engraving the core magic arrays of the 3 Flame Beast puppets. A few hours later, he completed the engravings and had Fang Shahan bring the 350-meter-tall combat puppets to East Lake City, one of the Fire Wing Empire's border cities. When the battle at East Lake City took place, the difference between the two sides was significant. Although the Fire Wing Empire had dispatched 2 Tier 5 NPCs and over 500 Tier 4 NPCs to defend the city, the Outer Worlds NPC army had dispatched an even stronger force of 4 Tier 5 NPCs, over 1,000 Tier 4 NPCs, and 6 million Tier 3 NPCs. The difference between the player armies of the two sides was also significant. Although the secret pavilion had dispatched many of its experts and gathered the help of many guilds, it only managed to form an army of around 400 Tier 4 players and 10 million Tier 3 players. In comparison, the Outer Worlds player army had over 800 Tier 4 players and 10 million Tier 3 players. The battle at East Lake City lasted more than a day. During this time, the 3 Flame Beast puppets played a vital role, pinning down 2 Tier 5 NPCs and 1 Tier 5 summoned creature. In the end, the Tier 5 summoned creature's control duration ran out, and the Outer Worlds NPCs and players had no choice but to retreat. Although the secret pavilion suffered a casualty ratio of 6-4, with 6 of the secret pavilion's members dying for every 4 of the Outer Worlds players, this result still shook the entire eastern continent. This was because no empire had ever attained such a casualty ratio before this battle. Typically, the various empires had an 8-2 or even 9-1 casualty ratio. If all battles could end with a 6-4 casualty ratio, the eastern continent's native forces would have a significant advantage in the long run, and the Outer World forces would eventually suffer defeat. This was because of the significant difference between the respawn points of the two sides. The Outer World players who died in battle could get resurrected only at the World Passage entrance. This meant that they would have to travel a great distance to return to the battlefield. Native players, on the other hand, could get resurrected in the fortresses or city's resurrection temple and rejoin the battle immediately. After the battle at East Lake City, many of the eastern continent's superpowers started sending requests for help to Zero Wing. Shifeng was naturally more than happy to accept these requests. Zero Wing could earn a ton of wealth, as well as the materials needed to manufacture the Blue Thunder flying ships and Flame Beast puppets, through these requests and even accumulate 7 Luminaries crystals. Subsequently, for the next month or so, Zero Wing's Flame Beast puppets visited one battlefield after another on the eastern continent. Initially, there were only 3 Flame Beast puppets moving from one battlefield to another. Later on, there were a dozen Flame Beast puppets divided among 3 or 4 battlefields at a time. Eventually, there were 34 Flame Beast puppets fighting in more than 10 battlefields simultaneously. Because of these Flame Beast puppets, the eastern continent's overall war situation experienced a significant improvement. In the meantime, Zero Wing had made a huge profit. And because of this massive wealth, not only did Zero Wing City, Ancient Rock City, Silverwing City, and Stone Forest City receive comprehensive improvements, but even the Lost Town had been upgraded to a basic city. Now, over 1 million Zero Wing members could be seen training in the Lost Town at all times. Moreover, during this past month, Zero Wing's Tier 3 member count had also breached 3 million. And thanks to the Lost Town's extraordinary tower and the environments of Zero Wing City and Ancient Rock City, the number of experts getting promoted to Tier 4 in Zero Wing also far exceeded that of all guilds in God's domain. Zero Wing now had over 200 Tier 4 players under its command. In addition, Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, and Yang Tianxing had succeeded in creating their Tier 5 mana bodies and gotten promoted to Tier 5, instantly increasing Zero Wing's overall combat power by a considerable margin. This development caused all of God's domain's guilds to grow envious. After all, during the same period, the 5 great super guilds had managed to produce only 1 Tier 5 player each in contrast to Zero Wing's 3. Moreover, this was after they had expended all their war contributions to exchange for resources that could aid in the Tier 5 promotion. Meanwhile, with Zero Wing's combat support, many player forces had managed to produce a significant number of Tier 4 players by utilizing the resources they acquired from their respective kingdoms and empires. This, in turn, gradually bridged the gap between God's domains and the Outer Worlds players and turned the tide of the War of Worlds in the Eastern Continent's favor. On the other hand, Starlink, which had constantly been opposing Zero Wing, wasn't doing so well. Starlink had failed to defend many of the NPC cities it controlled in the Dark Knight Empire and lost most of its investments there. The situation in the other empires and kingdoms Starlink operated was similar, and Starlink fell to the bottom of the various superpowers. Now, many of its members were even withdrawing from the guild. However, just when everyone thought the Second War of Worlds would stabilize again, like last time, an earth-shattering battle took place in Flamehorn City, one of the Fire Dragon Empire's top 8 cities. Working together, Flamehorn City's Magistrate Crobody, who was the Fire Dragon Empire's former Deputy Knight Commander and a level 200, Tier 5 Dragon Knight, and the War Gods Temple's Elder Lovefried, who was a demigod-level existence and one of the 10 Saints, fought a mysterious youth in Flamehorn City. However, after only 3 exchanges, the mysterious youth reduced both Crobody and Lovefried to ashes, and Flamehorn City disappeared from the Fire Dragon Empire. 5 days later, the mysterious youth appeared in the Glory Empire's Light City, along with several of the Outer World's Tier 5 NPCs. Together, they stormed the palace in Light City and killed the Glory Empire's Emperor and over a dozen other Tier 5 existences. Afterward, Light City also disappeared from the map of God's domain. The Glory Empire fell in the blink of an eye, which plunged the Eastern continent into unprecedented fear. During the First War of Worlds, only kingdoms had fallen to the outer world. In the eyes of players, empires were unshakable existences. This was because an empire's foundation wasn't something that Tier 5 existences could threaten. Even the appearance of multiple Tier 5 dragons would, at most, cause an empire severe losses. Not to mention, the attacked city was the Glory Empire's capital. The ancient barrier protecting the city could allow an allied Tier 5 combatant to go up against several hostile Tier 5 combatants easily. Light City itself had also had over a dozen Tier 5 NPCs garrisoning it, with some of them even equipped with legendary weapons and equipment. It was no exaggeration to say that Light City could put up a fight against even Tier 6 gods. Yet, the invincible Glory Empire had still fallen. Moreover, the souls of a considerable portion of the players killed in Light City had sustained heavy damage, which prohibited those players from logging into the game for 1 whole month. Some even had to restart with a new account. Ancient Rock City, City Lord's Mansion, Core Control Room. Currently, Shifeng sat alone inside the quiet and spacious hall. With Golden Soul activated, he tried using his mind to completely stop the operation of all mana within his vicinity. Over the past month, Shifeng had not only reached level 192 but also learned how to forcibly stop the operation of mana. Even without the help of Golden Soul, he could now incorporate the law of destruction into his sword techniques. The only problem was that doing so placed a much heavier burden on his concentration. It seems I need to push my concentration to Tier 6, no matter what. Otherwise, I can't truly control the law of destruction. When the effects of Golden Soul disappeared, Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at the shattered space around him. At this point, he was already flummoxed by the difficulty of raising his concentration to the Tier 6 standard. He had originally thought that he could continuously develop his concentration with the help of soul water and crystals of souls. Even if the process took a lot of time, it wouldn't matter. Unfortunately, he discovered that he was mistaken. Roughly 2 weeks ago, he had sensed that his concentration had reached the limits of Tier 5. No matter how much soul water and crystals of souls he consumed after that, his concentration did not improve in the slightest. In contrast, after consuming the meditation potions in the real world, he had broken through to the 3-star mental strength master standard 2 days ago. His improvement in the real world was many times faster than in God's domain. Just when Shifeng was racking his mind on how to improve his concentration, Fang Shahan suddenly entered the hall. Approaching Shifeng with a magic crystal recorder, Fang Shahan said with a grim expression, "Guild leader, I've uncovered the purpose of that mysterious youth's actions." "What's his aim?" Shifeng asked with concern. When the mysterious youth appeared in Flamehorn City, Shifeng had already guessed the other party's identity. The mysterious youth was none other than the scholar. However, compared to their meeting in the evil god's secret land, the scholar who had appeared in Flamehorn City had undergone significant changes. During their last meeting, the scholar didn't have any divine markings on his face. In Flamehorn City, The scholar had dark purple divine markings on his forehead and cheeks. Moreover, he also gave off a sacred feeling. His aim should be the 7 treasures. According to the information and video recordings taken, he demanded the 7 treasures from the NPCs he fought, Fang Shahan said as she passed the magic crystal recorder to Shifeng. When Shifeng activated the crystal, what appeared before him was a video recording of the battle in Light City. This video was taken by a Tier 4 assassin who had been spectating the battle from far away using a magic mirror. In the video, the Glory Empire's emperor could be seen taking out a silver emblem. Several barriers then appeared in front of the emperor, which blocked all of the scholar's attacks. After seeing his attacks blocked, the scholar said, as expected of the treasure of space, "Hand over the spatial emblem, and I will spare your life." However, the emperor did not agree to the scholar's demand, and he fought the scholar to a standstill, relying on his superb spatial manipulation techniques. Eventually, though, the scholar took out his staff, and the battle was quickly decided. Meanwhile, after seeing that the situation was amiss, the Tier 4 assassin, who was recording the battle, promptly fled Light City. He's looking for the 7 treasures? Shifeng frowned. Shifeng had constantly been searching for the 7 treasures. However, even now, he had managed to acquire only 4 of them: the treasure of illusion, treasure of time, treasure of fire, and treasure of wind. The treasure of wind was something Fire Dance and the others had gone to great lengths to locate and obtain. As for the 3 remaining treasures he was missing, he never found any information on them. Shifeng never thought that the scholar would also be looking for the 7 treasures. This was undoubtedly terrible news for him. Shifeng suspected that the scholar was currently under some restrictions, which prevented the scholar from attacking him. However, there was no doubt that the scholar was slowly and steadily removing those restrictions. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared attack and kill Tier 5 NPCs. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before the scholar came for him. "Oh, by the way, guild leader, I've found the 2 weapons you asked me to find," Fang Shahan said as she took out 2 longswords from her bag. With a pained expression, she continued, "The one named Broken Steel cost us 1 fragmented legendary weapon and 1 fragmented legendary armor to acquire." The 2 long swords she took out were both epic weapons that could be used up to level 180. Although they were excellent weapons for Tier 4 experts, they were hardly as valuable as fragmented legendary weapons. Yet, Shifeng was willing to exchange for them using fragmented legendary weapons. This was simply a huge loss. "Great. This is great." Shifeng grew ecstatic as he looked at the 2 long swords. Of the 2 swords, the sky blue one was named Broken Steel, while the black one was named Night Slayer. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Fang Shahan deemed Shifeng's decision wasteful, he paid no heed to the cost at all. After all, even 10 fragmented legendary weapons weren't worth as much as 1 legendary weapon. Not to mention, Solomon's sword was one of God's domain's 10 great legendary weapons. Previously, after the scholar's sudden appearance in Flamehorn City, Shifeng had been thinking of completing Solomon's sword to elevate his strength further. Otherwise, with the light of 2 worlds alone, he would have difficulty keeping himself alive in front of the scholar. The instant Shifeng accepted the 2 long swords from Fang Shahan, a system notification entered his ears. "System, all the fragments of Solomon's sword detected. Do you wish to recast Solomon's sword? Recast it." Chapter 29:16, Solomon's Sword. Chapter 29:16, Solomon's Sword. When Shifeng chose to recast Solomon's sword, the 5 fragments of Solomon's sword appeared in front of him one after another. Killing Ray, Disaster Blade, Netherworld Brilliance, Night Slayer, and Broken Steel. The 5 long swords resonated with one another and released a dazzling brilliance. A few seconds later, the 5 long swords fused, transforming into a crimson longsword with black markings. Black electric arcs flickered around the blade of the weapon, their presence repeatedly shattering the surrounding space. The instant the crimson longsword took shape, Fang Shahan was stunned. A legendary weapon? At this point, Fang Shahan was already familiar with the aura of legendary weapons. After all, Zero Wing had 5. Besides Shifeng's Light of 2 Worlds, Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, and Yang Tianxing each had a legendary weapon. Recently, Violet Cloud had also finally upgraded her Death's Sigh to the legendary rank. Every legendary weapon could grant its user the power to transcend tiers. With a legendary weapon, a Tier 5 player would instantly become an existence close to rivaling Tier 6 gods. Legendary weapons far exceeded fragmented legendary weapons in performance. After Solomon's sword took shape, Shifeng excitedly grabbed it and checked its statistics. Solomon's sword, one-handed sword, legendary rank, equipment requirement, strength 50,000, Tier 4 attack power, 460% of strength, attack speed, 3% of agility plus vitality, all attributes, increases according to the user's level. When equipped, attacks ignore 100% defense, attacks have a 15% chance to increase attack speed by 300%, attacks have a 60% chance to deal 300% damage, attacks have a 20% chance to deal 1000% damage, attacks deal 200% damage to targets under Tier 6, attacks carry the soul. Weakening effect, strength increased by 300%, agility increased by 180%, intelligence increased by 150%, endurance increased by 80%, attack speed increased by 170%, ignore levels plus 80, all sword type skills plus 2 level, up to Tier 6 peak, power of all attacks increased by 2 ranks, up to Tier 6 peak, effect of mana increased by 200%, all concentration consumption reduced by 30%. Additional passive skill Eternal Soul, improves the user's soul significantly and increases world perception by 1 level. Additional active skill 1 Destructive Thunderbolt, Tier 6 with the user as the center, inflict devastating damage to all enemies within a 10,000-yard radius for up to 10 seconds. The longer the skill is kept active, the greater its power becomes, up to Tier 6 peak. Cooldown, 1 minute. Additional active skill 2 World Sword, Tier 6 create 99 formless swords using the power of the world. The created swords will carry power 2 ranks higher than the user. Duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 1 hour. Additional active skill 3 Final Sword, Tier 6 activate all of Solomon's sword's power using the power of the user's soul for 1 attack. The stronger the user's soul, the stronger the activated power will be, up to Tier 6 peak rank. The resulting attack is capable of destroying the soul of all things. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Created by the ancient god of thunder. Solomon's sword possesses the power source of an ancient god, and it is capable of destroying all things. As expected of one of the 10 great legendary weapons. Its attributes are not the slightest bit inferior to the Light of Two Worlds'. Shifeng was astonished when he read Solomon's sword's statistics. The Light of Two Worlds was a weapon focused on improving its wielder's life rating, while Solomon's sword focused on improving its wielder's soul. The effects of the two weapons were of equal importance. When used together, they easily surpassed other legendary weapon pairings. Although Shifeng still hadn't reached Tier 6, both his life rating and soul were now close to reaching the Tier 6 standard. If he were to fight Los Ferid, the commander of the Outer World's 19th Army Corps, he could probably gain the upper hand even without using Golden Soul. By the way, there's one more important matter I need to tell you, Guild Leader, Fang Shahan said. She then took out an invitation card made entirely of 7 luminaries crystal and handed it to Shifeng. This is the invitation the 5 great super guilds sent to all first-rate guilds and above in God's domain. They are hosting a conference in Blackwing City tomorrow to discuss countermeasures for the Outer World forces and that mysterious youth. 7 luminaries crystal? What a generous move. Shifeng was a little surprised when he looked at the invitation card in his hand. 7 luminaries crystal was a resource the various superpowers were desperately trying to acquire. Even though Zero Wing had done the same, the guild only had a stockpile of 160,000 units and dared not spend them recklessly. Yet, the 5 great super guilds had used 7 luminaries crystals to create the invitation cards they sent to the various guilds. Moreover, this invitation card wasn't just a plain card, it had a special teleportation array engraved on it that allowed the card's owner to teleport to Blackwing City. Shifeng estimated that one invitation card would cost at least 5 7 luminaries crystals to make. Meanwhile, there were easily over 1,000 first-rate guilds, super first-rate guilds, and super guilds in God's domain. In other words, the 5 great super guilds would have had to spend at least 5,007 luminaries crystals. The 7 Luminaries Crystal Invitation card is the highest-ranking invitation. Below it are Mana Stone and Magic Crystal Invitation cards, Fang Shahan explained. According to the different invitation cards, the number of companions one can bring along will differ as well. The Magic Crystal Invitation only allows you to bring 1 companion, while the Mana Stone Invitation allows for 2 companions, and the 7 Luminaries Crystal Invitation allows for 4 companions. Even so, this is still plenty amazing. Creating these special teleportation items alone would cost a pretty penny, after all, Shifeng said. If it were up to him, he definitely wouldn't be willing to spend so much just to host a conference. Of course, the fact that the 5 great super guilds were willing to go so far also showed how much of a threat the mysterious youth was. Even in his previous life, he had never once seen such a grand conference in God's domain. Are we going? Fang Shahan couldn't help asking. In terms of overall combat power, Zero Wing was currently the undisputed number 1 guild in God's domain. The guild also wouldn't have any problems defending the Twin Towers Kingdom and its several guild cities. Hence, it didn't really matter whether Zero Wing participated in this conference or not. Moreover, Zero Wing was enemies with 2 of the 5 great super guilds. Of course we're going, Shifeng said, smiling. Have Fire, Violet, and Tianxing get ready. The 4 of you are coming with me. At this point, he no longer cared about the Outer World's NPC army. However, it was a different story for the scholar. According to Zero Wing's investigations, the scholar had deep ties with the Outer World's NPCs. It was quite likely that Shifeng would have to face the Outer World's NPC army when he met with the scholar again. Hence, he had to get the help of God's domain's player forces. After all, the various kingdoms and empires had opened up their treasuries because of the War of Worlds. With the various promotion resources these treasuries offered, the players of God's domain would improve rapidly. At the current rate, Tier 5 players would probably start popping up in larger numbers in another 1 or 2 months. At that time, the various superpowers' advantages would start to reveal themselves, and they would become significantly more useful than they were now. Most importantly, Zero Wing could take advantage of this guild conference to solidify its position in God's domain. After all, Zero Wing currently had very little influence in the Western continent. Moreover, because the Western continent wasn't involved in the War of Worlds, the Western continent's exploration of dungeons and ruins was significantly faster than the Eastern continent's. I'll notify them right away. Fang Shahan nodded to Shifeng's command. Truthfully, she was very interested in this gathering. After all, once the conference ended, the experts of the various guilds would interact with each other. These interactions might not seem like much on the surface, but they would allow experts to learn about different combat techniques and expand their knowledge of mana. If she was lucky and received inspiration, she might be able to create her Tier 5 mana body. Currently, her mana body's completion rate had reached 120%, and she couldn't improve it, no matter how much she tried. Rather than persisting in her current training, it would be much better to spar with other experts. Early the next morning, Shifeng teleported to Blackwing City together with Fang Shahan and the others. As for Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, they were tasked with keeping guard over Zero Wing's guild cities and the Twin Towers Kingdom as a precaution. Blackwing City, Teleportation Hall. Along with a flash of light, Shifeng's group of 5 arrived in the Teleportation Hall's central teleportation array. Blackwing City was much more crowded than normal. Apart from the experts of the invited guilds, experts from uninvited guilds and independent players were also in the city. The 5 great super guilds had invited all of God's domain's first-rate guilds and above to attend the conference this time. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that most of God's domain's top experts were gathered in Blackwing City today. This was a situation that normally couldn't be found in any city. Even if the uninvited guilds and independent players couldn't participate in the conference, they could still get a look at God's domain's strongest players. If they were fortunate, they might even get to see these top experts sparring with each other. Hence, when news of the 5 great super guilds holding a grand conference got out, countless guilds and players sought to enter Blackwing City. If not for Blackwing City requiring an entry pass, players would have long since flooded the city to the point of overflowing. Nonetheless, The number of players currently gathered in Blackwing City still exceeded 30 million. Moreover, most of the players roaming Blackwing City's streets were Tier 3. Tier 4 players were also present in large numbers. In the current Blackwing City, even refinement realm experts would have to act carefully and humbly. Otherwise, there was a high chance they would end up offending a flowing water realm expert or even a void realm expert. When Shifeng arrived at the Blackwing auction house, the designated conference venue, he found that over 1,000 Tier 4 experts belonging to the 5 great super guilds had established a perimeter. Even the weakest among these Tier 4 experts was at level 170 and geared in level 180 dark gold set equipment. Quite a number of these experts also had 4 to 5 pieces of level 180 epic equipment and weapons. As for the 5 players standing in the lead, not only were they over level 180, but even the weakest piece of equipment on them was level 180 epic equipment. All 5 of these players also boasted a fragmented legendary weapon paired with 2 or 3 pieces of fragmented legendary equipment. These players thoroughly displayed the 5 great super guilds' might. With all these Tier 4 players gathered in front of the Blackwing auction house, the terrifying aura they exuded deterred even ordinary Tier 4 players from approaching the building. This is crazy. So, this is the 5 great super guilds' strength. Crap. Our guild barely has any level 180 epic equipment, yet every one of the 5 great super guilds' Tier 4 experts has at least one. I think that any one of those 5 people standing in the lead can easily beat up our entire guild. Who do you think you are? Your guild is only a third-rate guild. Those 5 people wouldn't have trouble wiping out even second-rate guild. Do you know who those people are? They're the strongest talents belonging to the 5 great super guilds' younger generation. I heard that not only have all 5 of them reached the domain realm, but their mana bodies are even above the 110% completion rate. They are all bona fide monsters. It's a pity our guild isn't a first-rate guild. Otherwise, we would get to participate in the conference too. The players crowding the street outside the Blackwing auction house spoke with awe as they looked at the 5 great super guilds members. At the same time, they also felt envious of the players participating in the conference this time. After all, if they could learn a thing or two from one of the 5 great super guilds' Tier 4 experts, it would easily save them several months of training. Amid the crowd's hushed discussions, Tier 4 experts approached the Blackwing auction house and presented their invitation cards one after another. Then the 5 great super guilds experts ushered them into the auction house. At one point, when the leader of a 3-man group presented a 7 luminaries crystal invitation, a commotion immediately erupted among the bystanders. This was because the middle-aged man, who was the leader of this 3-man group, was actually a Tier 5 expert one nobody had ever heard of before. What a bunch of ignorant fools. Do they think only superpowers can produce Tier 5 experts? One of the 3-man group's members, a female great wizard holding a crimson staff, scoffed as she looked at the surrounding crowd scornfully. Sooner or later, our name of Shadow Vengeance will echo throughout God's domain. She felt only contempt for the various superpowers experts. This was because the various superpowers experts had relied on an astronomical amount of resources to develop themselves. In comparison, she and the experts of her guild had achieved their current strength through one battle after another. I heard that the Eastern Continent's Zero Wing would be attending as well. Between guild leader and Black Flame, I wonder, who is stronger? The third member of the group, a brown-haired youth, said excitedly. Of course, our guild leader is stronger. That Black Flame is only famous because he's the first person to reach Tier 5, the female great wizard sneered. She had great confidence in Iron Soul, their guild leader. This was because Iron Soul could receive a Tier 5 legendary monster's attack and survive while at Tier 4. Now that Iron Soul had reached Tier 5, his strength was immeasurable. Iron Soul, the middle-aged man, did not refute his companion's words, either. One of his goals in participating in the conference this time was to spar with God's Domain's other Tier 5 players and use this opportunity to bring Shadow Vengeance's name to fame. However, shortly after the great wizard finished speaking, crisp and sweet laughter entered the ears of their group of 3. What a bold claim. I wonder if your guild leader really is as strong as you say he is. As soon as these words fell, the trio from Shadow Vengeance turned toward the source of the voice and found themselves looking at a group of 5. The one who spoke was a tall woman with an alluring body clad in dark red leather. Zero Wings Fire Dance. 4 Tier 5s. Currently, Shifeng's group of 5 did not bother concealing their identities or statistics. Hence, the surrounding crowd gasped when they saw their tiers. Tier 5 players were basically mythical existences in the current God's domain. Most superpowers didn't even have one Tier 5 player under their command, yet Zero Wing had gained 3 more Tier 5 players aside from Black Flame, Gentle Snow, and Aqua Rose. At this time, the trio from Shadow Vengeance felt pressured. They never thought that Zero Wing was this strong. If it were a one-on-one, Iron Soul was confident he could still put up a fight. However, he would only be seeking his own death if he tried to fight 4 Tier 5 experts. After all, anyone capable of reaching Tier 5 definitely wasn't a weakling. If Tier 5 experts worked together, it wouldn't merely be a simple addition of combat power. Instead, their combat power would rise exponentially. Just when the female Great Wizard from Shadow Vengeance was about to say something, Fire Dance suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Before Iron Soul and his companions could react, Fire Dance was already standing in front of the 3 of them. Her movements were even more astonishing than someone using instantaneous movement. Someone using instantaneous movement would at least generate spatial fluctuations that others could detect. However, Fire Dance's movements generated neither sound nor fluctuation. Her presence had even disappeared completely when she moved. By the time Iron Soul's group detected her presence again, she had already crossed the 100-yard distance between them, as if she had been standing in front of them all along. "If you want to fight our guild leader, you'll have to go through me first," Fire Dance said, smiling as she looked at Iron Soul's group. She then disappeared and reappeared by Shifeng's side. Only after Shifeng's group of 5 had entered the Blackwing auction house did the Tier 4 players outside the auction house snap out of their daze. What amazing footwork! Iron Soul had a grim expression as he looked at Fire Dance's departing figure. "Guild leader, did you manage to see what she did?" the female Great Wizard couldn't help asking. Tier 5 players possessed far superior life ratings than Tier 4 players. There was even a massive gap in basic attributes. Hence, it was incredibly difficult for a Tier 4 player like herself to perceive the movements of a Tier 5 player. However, it should be a different story for Iron Soul. He could speed up his thoughts twofold with his Tier 5 concentration, so he should be able to perceive Fire Dance's movements. "I didn't," Iron Soul said, shaking his head. In a quiet tone, he added, "Rather than saying that she's fast, it'd be more appropriate to say that she exists everywhere within her mana domain. The mastery she has over her mana domain far exceeds mine." "Is she that strong?" The female Great Wizard was astonished. Since someone as strong as Iron Soul had said so, even if she didn't want to, she had no choice but to acknowledge that Fire Dance was probably stronger than Iron Soul. After recollecting himself, Iron Soul looked at his 2 companions and said, "There are countless experts in God's domain, and anyone capable of reaching Tier 5 is extraordinary. You should be more careful with your words. The fact that Black Flame has garnered such a reputation for himself proves that he isn't weak." At this point, Iron Soul no longer had any plans to ask Shifeng for a spar. After all, his chances of defeating even Fire Dance were slim already. What qualifications did he have to challenge God's domain's strongest player? Besides Shadow Vengeance, the other player forces originating from the Western continent promptly stopped underestimating Zero Wing. This was especially true for the superpowers that had managed to produce Tier 5 players. Time passed quickly, the number of guilds gathered in the Blackwing auction house continuously increasing. Several hours later, all of the invited guilds had finally arrived. Over 1,000 guilds were attending the conference, bringing more than 2,000 Tier 4 players and 23 Tier 5 players in all. The number of Tier 5 players attending the conference far exceeded everyone's expectations. Of the 23 Tier 5 players in attendance, 10 belonged to the 5 great super guilds. Apart from the original 5 Tier 5 players, the 5 great super guilds had each produced one more Tier 5 player during this period. The Secret Pavilion, Battle Wolves, Flower of 7 Sins, Violet Sword, Sacred Temple, and Divine Tribe had each produced one Tier 5 player as well. And in addition to Shadow Vengeance, 2 other first-rate guilds had also produced one Tier 5 player each. Even Shifeng did not expect such a development. With this revelation, the hierarchy of God's domain's player forces was bound to change drastically. However, compared to the change in God's domain's power hierarchy, the information the 5 great superguilds and secret pavilion shared was even more astonishing. According to their investigations, the mysterious youth had actually unified the Outer World's NPC army. Currently, all of the Outer World's NPCs scattered across the eastern continent were quietly making their way to the Fire Dragon Empire. This revelation put a grim expression on everyone's face. Needless to say, the mysterious youth intended to strike at the Fire Dragon Empire, one of God's domain's 4 great empires, by gathering such a large force. Although they didn't know the mysterious youth's aim, if the Fire Dragon Empire disappeared, the eastern continent would probably be doomed as well. That basically sums up the situation. After the secret pavilion's Yuan Taishin shared all of the investigation results with everyone in the hall, he said, "Currently, the eastern continent's various kingdoms and empires have started sending troops to the Fire Dragon Empire already. They are also doing their best to hinder the Outer World NPC army's movements. However, we estimate that the Outer World NPC army will finish gathering in, at most, another month. Once the Outer World NPCs have gathered, they will launch an all-out attack on the Fire Dragon Empire. To weaken the Outer World NPCs, we need to conduct guerrilla warfare together with the various kingdoms and empires and try to reduce the Outer World NPC army's strength as much as possible." However, just as Yuan Taishin was about to go into detail about the secret pavilion and the 5 great superguilds' plan to weaken the Outer World's NPC army, a commotion suddenly erupted outside the Blackwing auction house. The next moment, the space within the stadium-sized conference venue shattered, and 2 8-winged women walked out of the shattered space. The aura that the 2 alluring women radiated immobilized all of the Tier 4 players present. Only the Tier 5 players could barely move. Fallen archangels. Why would they appear here? Everyone doubted their eyes when they saw the 2 alluring women. Fallen angels were existences close to rivaling dragons, while fallen archangels rivaled divine dragons. Meanwhile, the 2 women before them were both bona fide level 200, Tier 5 fallen archangels. In an era where Tier 6 gods had disappeared from the mortal world, Tier 5 fallen archangels were no different from gods. Heaven-blessed individuals, hand over the 7 treasures. After declaring the reason for their presence, one of the fallen archangels turned to Shifeng, while the other faced a Tier 5 middle-aged man, Iron Soul. "They're going straight for the 7 treasures?" Shifeng's expression turned solemn as he looked at the 2 fallen archangels. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Shifeng already had a huge headache dealing with the scholar. However, he never thought that the scholar could get 2 fallen archangels to do his bidding. This situation was simply inconceivable. Others might not know the true extent of a Tier 5 fallen archangel's strength, but he did. In the past, he had watched a Tier 6 god-ranked expert clash with a Tier 5 fallen archangel. That person was none other than Endless Scars, the #1 expert on God's Domain's experts list at the time. Back then, despite wielding a legendary weapon, Endless Scars had struggled to kill a level 220, Tier 5 fallen archangel. If an ordinary Tier 6 god-ranked expert encountered a Tier 5 fallen archangel, their only option was to run away. After all, a Tier 5 fallen archangel could slay a Tier 6 god-ranked expert by relying on their immensely high HP. Now, 2 fallen archangels had appeared in the Blackwing auction house. Chapter 29:17, Ancient Gods Awakening. Chapter 29:17, Ancient Gods Awakening. When the 2 fallen archangels saw that neither Shifeng nor Iron Soul showed any intention of handing over the 7 treasures, they both immediately summoned a spear of crimson lightning. Die! The 2 fallen archangels threw their spears at Shifeng and Iron Soul simultaneously. Tier 5 taboo skill, Thundering Devastator. The lightning spears were incredibly fast, leaving red trails as they shot toward their respective targets. The Tier 4 players in the spear's paths died instantly, their bodies evaporating without a trace. The Tier 4 players killed didn't even realize that they had died. They only saw a red light enter their vision before they found themselves forcibly logged out of the game. Of those present in the hall, Only the Tier 5 players managed to react to the fallen Archangel's lightning spears. Iron Soul immediately grabbed his shield and entered a defensive stance when he saw one of the lightning spears coming for him. Simultaneously, spatial barriers formed in front of him one after another, 30 of them tightly packed in front of Iron Soul's dark mist shield. This was Iron Soul's trademark move. Mana technique, Boundless Barrier. Boundless Barrier was also why he managed to block an attack from a Tier 5 legendary monster when he was still at Tier 4. Now that he was at Tier 5, the technique's defensive power had also undergone a qualitative transformation. Boom! The next moment, the lightning spear thrown at Iron Soul pierced through the spatial barriers one after another. However, with each layer the spear penetrated, the spear's power also weakened. When the spear broke through all 30 layers and landed on Iron Soul's dark mist shield, the shield acted like a black hole that absorbed all of the spear's remaining power. Iron Soul stumbled half a step backward and lost around 10 million HP. For Iron Soul, a level 186, Tier 5 Guardian Knight, losing 10 million HP was nothing. Not to mention, unlike the average Tier 5 Guardian Knight, who had around 200 million HP, Iron Soul's maximum HP was 300 million. This was because, in addition to coming across many fortuitous opportunities, he also boasted a legendary shield. Iron Soul might not rank at the top among Tier 5 players in attack power, but he definitely ranked first in defense. This was also what gave Iron Soul the confidence to challenge the various superpowers Tier 5 experts. However, before any of the players could voice their awe of Iron Soul's amazing defense, the lightning spear thrown at Shifeng crashed into an invisible wall and deflected toward the hall's ceiling. The spear then pierced through the ceiling's defensive magic array and opened a hole in the ceiling, revealing the sky outside. Everyone was thunderstruck. What did he do? That's a Tier 5 taboo skill we're talking about. Many of the Tier 4 experts and even the 5 great super guilds Tier 5 experts hadn't caught how Shifeng had actually deflected a Tier 5 taboo skill just now. Moreover, Shifeng did not receive even a point of damage in the process. He was evidently much stronger than Iron Soul. However, Shifeng did not relax after turning the fallen Archangel's attack. Instead, he shouted, "Everyone, exit the hall immediately. This is Blackwing City. So long as the NPCs arrive, these two fallen Archangels should leave." Everyone hurriedly moved their feet when they heard Shifeng's words, none of them daring to linger for even a moment longer. Although Shifeng and Iron Soul had effortlessly stopped the two fallen Archangels' attacks, everyone could tell that the fallen Archangels had merely launched a casual attack just now. Apart from the Tier 5 players present, anyone that accidentally got caught in one of the fallen Archangels' attacks would probably vaporize. After all, these two fallen Archangels were existences capable of rivaling Tier 6 gods. Even ordinary Tier 5 players were nothing in front of them. The Tier 4 experts in the hall promptly evacuated. As for the Tier 5 experts, they surrounded the two fallen Archangels. I never thought my first battle after being promoted to Tier 5 would be against such monsters. What's even more surprising is that I'll be fighting alongside you old monsters. Mythology's Odin, who was wearing a white cloak and had completely concealed his face, said as he looked at the several Tier 5 experts around him. "You can fight them by yourself if you don't want to work together. I won't stop you," an old man in dark grey armor from Netherworld Empire said as he glanced at Odin. As for the elderly men from the 3 other super guilds, they remained silent as they looked at Odin and the old man in dark grey armor, knowing that these two old men were longtime rivals. If the conference this time did not concern God's domain's continued existence, neither of them would have been willing to stay in the same room as the other. Meanwhile, the two fallen Archangels before them were existences that even beyond domain realm experts like themselves had to be wary of. Zilluware, Fallen Archangel, Legendary, level 200 HP 900 billion, Garudika, Fallen Archangel, Legendary, level 200 HP 900 billion. Even if all 23 Tier 5 experts worked together, they wouldn't be able to kill even one of these fallen Archangels, let alone two. Lowly ants, learn the consequences of going against the Master, the fallen Archangel Zilluware said as she looked with disdain at the Tier 5 players surrounding her. She then began chanting an incantation. The magic arrays of 3 Tier 5 curses started forming around Zilluware, drawing all of the mana in the hall. Compared to the taboo skill she used before, these 3 curses were significantly stronger. However, the players present were all Tier 5 experts. They had no intention of letting Zilluware complete her incantation. When Zilluware began chanting, Odin had already appeared behind her and silently stabbed his translucent spatial sword into the fallen archangel's back. -41,564,786. Damage exceeding 40 million appeared above Zilluware's head. However, Odin showed no excitement whatsoever when he saw this damage. On the contrary, a frown even formed on his face. What high defense! The dark grey armored old man holding a greatsword exclaimed as he looked at Zilluware. Odin's attack power ranked 3rd in their group of 5 old men. Meanwhile, the attack he just used against Zilluware was also his strongest move, a combination of a Tier 5 skill with the silver combat technique Blade's Heart. If a Tier 5 player got hit by this move directly, they would die on the spot. Yet, Odin's attack only cost the fallen archangel 40 million HP. It didn't even affect Zilluware's chanting in the slightest. After nonchalantly completing the incantations for her curses, Zilluware said, "Ants, your struggles are futile." The 3 Tier 5 curses magic arrays fully took form, and thousands of pitch-black feathers manifested inside the hall. These feathers then transformed into crows made of crimson lightning that flew toward Odin and the others. A triple spell combination? The 5 great super guild's old monsters were momentarily stunned by this situation. In God's domain, merging spells was much more difficult than merging skills. However, so long as one succeeded, the result would be much stronger than the fusion of 2 skills. Since Zilluware had merged 3 spells into one, the power of the resulting attack would definitely be unprecedented in God's domain. Immediately, the 5 old monsters used their respective life-saving skills while doing their best to evade the lightning crows. They were no match for the fallen angel Zilluware at all. Upon seeing this, Iron Soul, who was going up against the fallen angel Garudika, wore a grim expression on his face. He could sense that every one of these lightning crows carried power at the Tier 6 basic standard. Although they weren't as powerful as the earlier lightning spear, their large numbers made it impossible to completely block and dodge them all. Of the players present, only Shifeng did not find this situation surprising. A level 200, Tier 5 fallen archangel was basically a Tier 6 god. Meanwhile, killing a group of Tier 5 players was practically child's play for a Tier 6 god. Normally, players needed to reach Tier 6 to stand a chance against a Tier 5 fallen archangel. However, all of the Tier 5 players present had only recently gotten promoted to Tier 5. Their mastery of mana and equipment standards were nowhere near the passing mark for a Tier 5 player. Although they had astonishingly high combat standards, they couldn't bridge the gigantic gap in basic attributes. Meanwhile, after Zilluware had thoroughly suppressed the 5 great super guild's old monsters, Garudika also took action. Similar to Zilluware, Garudika used a triple spell combination. However, rather than creating thousands of lightning crows, she created hundreds of lightning swords instead. Although these lightning swords weren't as flexible as the lightning crows, they were much faster than the lightning crows. Every lightning sword also carried power at the Tier 6 intermediate standard, and any Tier 5 player that got struck by them would die without question. For a time, more than 500 lightning swords rampantly attacked Shifeng, Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, and Yang Tianqing. There were also over 100 lightning swords attacking Iron Soul. This situation forced Shifeng's group and Iron Soul to defend themselves frantically. Shifeng fared relatively well against the lightning swords. Solomon's sword had improved both his soul and world perception, which allowed him to perceive the lightning sword's movements with excellent clarity. In addition, as the power of these swords was only at the Tier 6 intermediate standard, he was more than capable of blocking them with his swords. As for Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, and Yang Tianqing, the 3 worked together to make up for their respective shortcomings. They also had Violet Cloud to provide constant healing and defensive buffs and Shifeng to cover any blunders. Hence, no matter how well Garudika coordinated her lightning swords, she didn't pose a real threat to Zero Wing's group of 4. Iron Soul, on the other hand, continuously lost HP throughout the battle. Even with Violet Cloud healing him occasionally, his HP still fell steadily. "Guild leader, we can't continue like this," Violet Cloud said as she started having difficulty keeping up with the healing. "These lightning swords are weakening the effects of my healing spells. At this rate, he'll get killed in another 10 seconds. Garudika's rampant attacks prevented Iron Soul from approaching their group and vice versa. However, if Iron Soul continued fending off those lightning swords on his own, he was sure to die. "I'll pin her down, so find an opportunity to group up." When Shifeng saw that Iron Soul had less than half of his HP remaining, he decided to stop holding back and activated World Sword. Immediately, 99 formless swords appeared around Shifeng, each one carrying power at the Tier 6 peak standard. Shifeng then sent these formless swords at Garudika. Swords orbit. When Garudika sensed the formless swords approaching her, she promptly recalled all her lightning swords to defend herself. How is he so strong? Iron Soul was stunned when he saw Garudika actively defending herself and at a disadvantage. From what Iron Soul could see, Shifeng was no match for the fallen archangel when it came to manipulating a large number of swords. With his 99 formless swords, Shifeng exhibited combat standards at only the refinement realm. In comparison, the fallen angel Garudika exhibited combat standards at the flowing water realm with her several hundred lightning swords. However, because Shifeng's formless swords carried much greater power, they could overcome the hundreds of lightning swords. While such a victory might seem crude, it was still incredibly astonishing. After all, the other Tier 5 players in the room were basically running for their lives when faced with the two fallen archangels' attacks. Yet, Shifeng was fighting toe-to-toe with a fallen archangel. With Shifeng holding off Garudika, Iron Soul was finally able to join Violet Cloud's group of 3. The 4 of them then supported Shifeng from the side, and Garudika's HP bar actually decreased slightly. Although Garudika's battle recovery could easily restore all of the HP she lost, this situation still astonished the 5 great super guild's old monsters. After the battle continued for another 10 seconds, the first casualties finally appeared as Zilluware killed 2 Tier 5 experts. This situation infuriated the other Tier 5 experts present, but there was nothing they could do about it. After 26 seconds had passed since Shifeng activated World Sword, the space within the hall suddenly shattered once more. A woman wielding a 7-colored staff and wearing a sacred white robe and a golden crown then walked out of this shattered space. The Tier 5 players present froze for a second as an indescribably holy aura enveloped the room upon this woman's appearance, the aura instilling a sense of fear in their hearts. As for the 2 fallen archangels, they similarly stopped their attacks and stared at the approaching woman with eyes brimming with fear. This holy woman was none other than Charlene, who had been resting in Blackwing City. However, compared to the last time Shifeng had met with Charlene, this woman felt like a completely different person. Currently, Charlene looked and felt no different from a god, and every one of her actions was intertwined with the world itself. Her mere presence inspired feelings of reverence toward her. Damn it! Those good-for-nothings actually let this goddess escape. Zilluware cursed out loud when she saw the 24 or so dead or heavily injured Tier 5 Outerworld NPCs in the shattered space behind Charlene. The scholar must have lost his mind, seeing as he summoned you creatures, Charlene said as she looked at Zilluware and Garudika. After glancing at Shifeng's group, she continued, "But since you've come here already, stay here forever. You think you can keep us here?" After observing Charlene in greater detail, Zilluware laughed and said, "You've just awakened. Do you think we're no match for you?" However, as soon as Zilluware finished speaking, Charlene waved her 7-colored staff. Suddenly, all of the Tier 5 players present, including Shifeng, felt time slowing down. Even though their brains were still capable of thought, they couldn't move their bodies at all. She stopped time? Shifeng was astonished when he saw the grey world around him. Charlene's magic was simply heaven-defying. However, no more than 1 second after Charlene stopped time, the 2 fallen archangels actually broke free from the restraints of time, regaining their movement. They then charged at Charlene with spears of lightning in their hands. However, their movements now were much slower than before, so slow that even Tier 1 players could keep up with their movements. Meanwhile, Charlene simply raised a hand and shattered the surrounding space into countless fragments. She then turned these spatial fragments into blades and launched them at the two fallen archangels. The two fallen archangels brandished their spears to defend themselves, but they couldn't stop all of the spatial blades. The next moment, damage values exceeding 200 million appeared above the two fallen archangels' heads one after another. After one round of attacks, the two fallen archangels had lost over 5 billion HP each. However, compared to their maximum HP of 900 billion, a loss of 5 billion was nothing but a scratch. After the battle continued for another 20 seconds, the two fallen archangels' HP had fallen to the 80% threshold, proving that Charlene had the ability to kill them. Damn it! She has actually awakened to such an extent already. Zilluware glared at Charlene in vexation. We'll die here if we keep fighting, Garudika said with a grim expression. We need to retreat. If we wait until Blackwing City's ruler returns, we won't even have a chance to flee. We have no other choice but to use that move, Zilluware said, gritting her teeth as she took out a black rock. The moment Zilluware took out this black rock, a hint of wariness appeared on Charlene's face. When the Tier 5 players present saw Charlene's reaction, they were puzzled, as they couldn't sense any aura or power from the black rock. In their eyes, the black rock was just an ordinary rock. However, before anyone could react, the black rock in Zilluware's hand disintegrated into dust. A strand of incomprehensibly strong power then formed on her palm and shattered the restraints of time on her, allowing her to recover her full mobility. World Blade. After regaining her mobility, Zilluware gripped the strand of power in her hand and swung it at Shifeng, Iron Soul, and Charlene. The frozen time in the hall immediately started flowing again, and 3 streaks of black light that cut through the world itself flew toward Shifeng, Iron Soul, and Charlene. Shifeng and Iron Soul were surprised by this development. They never thought that Zilluware would persist in attacking them, even in this situation. When Shifeng saw the approaching black light, he felt his soul shuddering like never before. He promptly activated Void Shield, World Breaker, and Final Sword simultaneously, then executed Sword's transmigration without hesitation. As for Iron Soul, he similarly activated his strongest trump card, his legendary shield transforming into a dark mist that enveloped him. Boom! Along with a powerful explosion, the figure of a person shot out of the dust cloud like a cannonball and struck one of the conference hall's iron walls, shattering the magic arrays strengthening the wall. Guild Leader. Fire Dance was startled when she recognized the person planted in the wall. Shifeng could cut apart even the world itself when using World Breaker. Yet, even after he had combined World Breaker with Final Sword and Sword's transmigration, he still suffered a severe blow, losing over 2/3 of his HP. This outcome was simply unbelievable. Meanwhile, when the dust settled, Iron Soul appeared standing in his original position. However, his body had been cleanly bisected, and nothing remained of his HP bar. Along with Iron Soul's death, a bronze ring had also appeared by his corpse. Upon seeing this bronze ring, Zilluware promptly grabbed it. In the meantime, Garudika took advantage of the opportunity and thrust her spear at Shifeng. Facing Garudika's thrust, Shifeng felt powerless. After defending himself against Zilluware's World Blade, not only did he enter a heavily injured state, but both his arms had also gone numb. He wouldn't be able to move them any time soon. However, just when Garudika was about to hit Shifeng, Charlene suddenly appeared in front of him and stopped Garudika's lightning spear with the tip of her finger. Boom! The next moment, the lightning spear suddenly dissipated harmlessly. An invisible force then sent Garudika flying backward and smashing into the wall on the other side of the room, her HP falling by over 100 million. Not good. Run! Zilluware shouted. She then tore space and disappeared into the opening together with the bronze ring she snagged. Garudika also tried to flee when she saw Zilluware retreating. However, before Garudika could even turn, Charlene was already in front of the fallen archangel, tapping her staff on the other party's forehead. Garudika found herself immobilized, her HP plummeting. After this situation continued for 30 seconds, Garudika's body transformed into a muddy crystal the size of a fist. Simultaneously, the intensity of Charlene's aura dropped off. After storing the muddy crystal, Charlene turned to Shifeng, who had just gotten back on his feet after much difficulty, and said, "You come with me. Everyone else, hurry back and get ready. You don't have much time left." After Charlene finished speaking, she waved her staff and summoned a teleportation gate. She then entered the gate, leaving behind Shifeng and the other Tier 5 players, who were still in a daze. After scanning the surviving players, Shifeng had Fire Dance and the others returned to Zero Wing first. He then contacted Melancholic Smile and had her use all the available manpower to produce the Blue Thunder flying ship and the mobile fortress. These mobile weapons of mass destruction would play a crucial role in hindering the Outer World NPC army's advance. Afterward, Shifeng stepped into the teleportation gate Charlene summoned. The remaining players in the conference hall also understood what Charlene's words meant. Now that the mysterious youth had acquired another of the 7 treasures, his strength would most likely soar. If that happened, they would definitely have a much more difficult time fighting the Outer World's NPC army. Hence, they needed to return and immediately initiate countermeasures. They would also need to accelerate their plan to hinder the Outer World NPC army's advance. For a time, all of the Eastern Continent's player forces seethed with activity. Even the Western Continent's player forces began sending reinforcements en masse to the Eastern Continent. This was because everyone understood that the Fire Dragon Empire's fall basically meant game over for the entire God's domain. Hence, they needed to defend the Empire at all costs. On the other side, after Shifeng took the teleportation gate, he found himself in the top-floor hall of the Stargazing Tower. Charlene was sitting on the throne at the end of the hall, her complexion a little pale. She looked much weaker than when she killed the fallen Archangel Garudika. The scholar has lost his mind. Now that he has obtained another of the 7 treasures, he will eventually recover a significant portion of his power, Charlene said, getting straight to the point when she saw Shifeng. You currently have 4 of the 7 treasures on you. He will definitely target you next. If he acquires all of the 7 treasures, he will be able to recover fully and regain control over the entire God's domain. At that time, none of you heaven-blessed individuals will escape his wrath. You'll even be banished from this world of God's domain. Regain control over God's domain. Shifeng was confused by Charlene's words. The ancient gods used to rule over God's domain but ultimately lost control over it in the final struggle. The scholar is one of those ancient gods, Charlene said, nodding. Currently, most of his power is sealed in the 7 treasures. Or to be precise, the 7 treasures were created using his power. Right now, only a Tier 6 heaven-blessed individual can prevent him from making a full recovery. And as you are only one step away from getting promoted to Tier 6, I hope you can accomplish this quest. As soon as Charlene finished speaking, the sound of a system notification entered Shifeng's ears. System, congratulations. You have triggered the mythical quest Ancient God's Awakening. Quest content: prevent the awakening of the ancient god. Quest reward unknown. There will be no penalty for failing the quest. Do you wish to accept this quest? Shifeng was nonplussed when he read the quest content. Did he even have a choice? Charlene had already stated very clearly that all players would be finished if he failed the quest. In that case, there naturally wouldn't be a need to impose any penalties. I accept this quest, Shifeng said as he looked at Charlene. After further thought, he added, however, my concentration is currently stuck at the Tier 5 peak standard. Without it reaching Tier 6, I can't get promoted to Tier 6, much less stop that ancient god. Charlene smiled at Shifeng's attempt to bargain with her. She then said, just say it if you want benefits. I'm not a stingy person. Since you've already agreed to take on this quest, I'll naturally provide you with a certain degree of support. Currently, your concentration is indeed incapable of reaching Tier 6, and the reason for that is simple: you still lack accumulations. The gap between Tier 5 and Tier 6 is much greater than you think. At your current improvement speed, you'll probably need 1.5 years to elevate your concentration to Tier 6. A year and a half? Do I have that much time? Shifeng asked, frowning. Now, let alone 1.5 years, it would be a miracle if he had even 2 or 3 months to reach Tier 6. After all, the person targeting him was an ancient god. Of course not. However, the The scholar has acquired the 3 treasures only recently. He also fears you somewhat. Until he recovers to a certain extent, he won't attack you anymore. If you're afraid for your safety, you can remain in Blackwing City. He won't dare barge into this place in his current state. However, the Fire Dragon Empire will probably be in trouble. There's a person sealed in the Fire Dragon Empire, and if this person is released, all of you will similarly be doomed, Charlene said, chuckling. As to how you can improve your concentration quickly, don't you have the treasure of illusion? You can use it to forcefully raise your concentration. After saying so, Charlene took out a muddy crystal, which was the crystallized form of the fallen archangel Garudika. This is that fallen archangel's soul. You should be able to produce a crystal of souls of incredible purity with it and break through to tier 6 with her accumulations, Charlene said as she tossed the muddy crystal to Shifeng. Start your attempt now. You don't have much time left. When Shifeng accepted the muddy crystal, he could sense incredible soul power in it. Only, this soul power was too chaotic, even a small portion of it could cause a tier 5 player to lose their mind. Afterward, Charlene disappeared, leaving Shifeng alone in the hall. Shifeng did not hesitate for long. He took out the soul orb and began refining the fallen archangel Garudika's soul. The outcome turned out as Charlene said. When the soul orb finished refining Garudika's soul, it produced a 7-colored crystal of souls containing soul power of incredible purity. Everything is up to you now. After Shifeng took a long look at the 7-colored crystal of souls, he swallowed it without hesitation. Suddenly, an indescribable comfort enveloped his body as boundless energy flooded his mind, continuously expanding his sea of consciousness. 1 hour. 3 hours. 1 day. After 2 whole days, Shifeng opened his eyes and found that the world around him had changed. Compared to before, the various elements of mana in the natural environment looked much more orderly. Before, he had felt as if he were looking at a pile of rubbish when he tried perceiving the mana around him. Everything was a mess, and sorting through them required a lot of effort. Now, the various elements of mana were like items neatly displayed on a shelf. He could easily locate and reach out to any element he wanted, which made it much easier to control mana. Amazing. This is simply amazing. Just one of these 7-colored crystals of souls increased my concentration to the tier 6 intermediate standard. Shifeng was filled with ineffable excitement. He had thought he would be fortunate if the 7-colored crystal could raise his concentration to the tier 6 basic standard. He would have been satisfied with such a result, as it would qualify him to challenge his tier 6 promotion. Although his chances of creating a superior divine body with tier 6 basic concentration would be less than 20%, it was still better than nothing. However, now that his concentration had reached the tier 6 intermediate standard, his control and perception of mana were much stronger than if he only had tier 6 basic concentration. Now, his chances of successfully creating a superior divine body should be around 30%. Following this, Shifeng had Zero Wing frantically collecting 7 luminaries crystals for the subsequent month. He even traded some of the Flame Beast puppets for 7 luminaries crystals, with 1 Flame Beast puppet going for 4,007 luminaries crystals, 200 magic elven cores, and all the materials needed to manufacture 1 Flame Beast puppet. Initially, Shifeng had not intended to sell the Flame Beast puppets. This was because Fire Dance and the others already had the strength needed to explore the top of the world, where they could acquire a lot of 7 luminaries crystals. However, to strengthen God's Domain's player forces enough to resist the Outer World's NPC army properly, selling the Flame Beast puppets became a necessity. After all, the secret silver combat puppets required highly skilled pilots to exhibit their full strength. Ordinary experts wouldn't cut it at all. It would take at least a Void Realm expert to display the Flame Beast puppets' tier 5 combat power. There were only so many Void Realm experts in Zero Wing. Even if their numbers kept increasing, the rate of increase couldn't match the Flame Beast puppets' production rate. Zero Wing's sales of Flame Beast puppets immediately boosted the overall combat power of the player forces, hindering the Outer World forces' advance. The guild even earned over 200,000 7 luminaries crystals from the exchanges, increasing Shifeng's stockpile to 400,000. Apart from the players' side, The number of NPC armies gathered at the Fire Dragon Empire's borders increased a lot during this past month. On the Outer World NPC's side, close to half of the NPC army had already assembled outside the Fire Dragon Empire, preparing to launch an all-out assault on the Empire. Blackwing City, stargazing tower, looking at the pile of 7 luminaries crystals in front of him, Shifeng took a deep breath and mentally prepared himself. During this past month, he had already fully mastered the law of destruction. He had also mentally simulated the creation process for his superior divine body hundreds of times to improve his chances of success. Without further elevating his concentration standard, he couldn't increase his success rate any further. However, raising his concentration standard was impossible within a short period. I have 4 chances. This should be enough with a 30% success rate. After saying so, Shifeng followed the records of the ancient god's legacy and began constructing his superior divine body using the law of destruction. Constructing a divine body was much more complicated than constructing a mana body. This was because a divine body was akin to a miniature world, not something that could be completed with just a few magic arrays. It required more than 300 Grandmaster magic arrays as its core. These Grandmaster magic arrays would then absorb the power within the supplied 7 luminaries crystals through the designated world law and create a complete miniature world. Simultaneously manipulating so many Grandmaster magic arrays was unfeasible without Tier 6 concentration. Meanwhile, the process of constructing a superior divine body was even more rigorous. A superior divine body needed over 1,000 Grandmaster magic arrays as its core. Unless one's control of mana reached a certain level, manipulating such a complex core magic array was out of the question. Moreover, the mana within 7 luminaries crystals was of incomparable purity, more than 10 times heavier than even ordinary solid mana, and thus incredibly difficult to manipulate. The next moment, Shifeng stimulated 100,000 7 luminaries crystals with his mana and guided the mana that burst out from them into the 1,000 plus Grandmaster magic arrays he had pre-constructed. Boom. However, partway through activating the magic arrays, half of them suddenly stopped working, and the entire core magic array crumbled. Failure. Manipulating the 7 luminaries crystals' mana indeed isn't easy. Shifeng wasn't too surprised by his failure. After all, this was his first time manipulating mana from 7 luminaries crystals. Following this, he rested for 3 hours. After his mental state had fully recovered, he promptly began his second attempt. Boom. Another failure. Third attempt. This time, Shifeng had a crazy idea utilizing the light of 2 worlds' golden soul to elevate his soul's standard. Although golden soul had a short duration, he could use this buff to get through the instability caused by the initial burst of mana. The only problem with this plan was that his concentration standard would plummet once golden soul's duration ended, which would increase the difficulty of manipulating the core magic array afterward. Golden Soul, activate. Shifeng tightened his grip on the light of 2 worlds as he decided to take the risk. As expected, he got through the initial burst of mana much more easily with his elevated concentration standard, and he activated all of the Grandmaster magic arrays right away. He also guided the 7 luminaries crystals' mana into these magic arrays with relative ease. However, when he had guided half of the mana into the magic arrays, Golden Soul lapsed. The buff's disappearance nearly caused him to lose control of the mana. 5 minutes. So long as I can last 5 more minutes, I'll be able to finish transferring all of the 7 luminaries crystals' mana. Shifeng gritted his teeth and struggled desperately to keep the Grandmaster magic arrays in operation. He also overburdened his mind, not daring to make even the slightest mistake. 1 second. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. Shifeng's complexion turned paler and paler as the seconds ticked by. Sweat continuously formed on his forehead. Nevertheless, he persisted. After the 3rd minute elapsed, Shifeng's vision became blurry and his mind cloudy. His body also began shivering slightly. 1 last minute. 1 last minute. Shifeng started feeling very sleepy, and even the system had begun warning him to log out and rest. However, he forced himself to remain conscious, going as far as biting his tongue and using the pain to stay awake. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. At this point, the world around Shifeng had become one big blur, and his mind was basically shutting down already. However, relying on instinct and his familiarity with manipulating magic arrays, he was barely able to continue guiding the 7 luminaries crystals mana into the Grandmaster magic arrays and keep them operating normally. Shortly afterward, though, Shifeng's consciousness lapsed briefly, and he lost control of the core magic array. Did I fail? After Shifeng recovered from his brief lapse, his heart sank. At this time, though, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System, congratulations. You have successfully constructed a superior divine body. The constructed superior divine body's completion rate is at 92% and has reached the Tier 6 standard. The constructed superior body is evaluated to be at the epic rank. Do you wish to get promoted to Tier 6? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,